Imagine an army so disciplined that even trained soldiers from powerful empires refused to face them in open battle. Imagine a leader who did not just win wars but changed the way war itself was fought forever. A kingdom where hesitation meant death, where retreat was not an option, and where fear did not come from numbers, but from strategy, discipline, and a leader who demanded perfection. This is not a legend made to entertain. This is the story of Shaka Zulu, a man who rose from rejection, violence, and exile to build one of the most feared military forces in African history. And by the time his enemies realized what was happening, it was already too late. Because Shaka Zulu did not just fight wars. He redesigned war itself. Introduction. To understand Shaka Zulu, you cannot start with power. You must start with pain. He was not born into comfort or security. His early life was marked by instability, humiliation, and rejection. He was the son of a Zulu chief, but he was never treated like a future king. Instead, he was pushed aside. And that rejection became the first spark of transformation. Because history often repeats one pattern. Those who are underestimated often become the most dangerous when they rise. Early life and shaping of a warrior. Shaka grew up in a world where strength decided everything. Tribes fought for land. Survival was not guaranteed. Respect had to be earned through force. But Shaka did not grow into strength in a normal way. He was not the biggest warrior. He was not the fastest. But he was observant. He watched everything. How warriors trained. How battles were lost. How fear spread faster than weapons. And he began to understand something others ignored. Most armies did not lose because they were weak. They lost because they were unorganized. That idea would become the foundation of everything he built later. The breaking point. Shaka's early life was filled with rejection, especially from his own community. He was not accepted. He was not respected. And at times, he was forced out completely. This period of exile changed him deeply. He saw how different tribes operated. He saw weakness in their systems. He saw warriors who fought with courage but without coordination. And he asked a question that would change history. What if fear was not enough to win wars? What if discipline was stronger than numbers? What if an army could move like one mind instead of many individuals? That question became his obsession. The rise of a new military mind. When Shaka eventually gained power, he did not simply lead. He rebuilt everything. He changed weapons. He changed formations. He changed training. And most importantly, he changed mindset. Before Shaka, warfare in the region was often based on distance combat and scattered engagement. Shaka eliminated that completely. He forced close combat discipline that demanded total commitment. No hesitation. No disorder. No confusion. Only precision. The Ikwa Revolution. One of Shaka's most important innovations was a shorter stabbing spear. This was not just a weapon change. It was a psychological shift. Long throwing spears allowed distance and escape. His new weapon removed that comfort. Warriors had to engage directly. This increased pressure. It increased control. And it increased fear in enemies who suddenly found themselves forced into close combat with no room to retreat safely. It was not just about killing. It was about removing options. The buffalo formation. Shaka did not rely on strength alone. He relied on structure. His most famous formation resembled a hunting system. The front line acted like the horns of a buffalo, surrounding and trapping the enemy. The center acted as pressure, holding and striking directly. The rear acted as reserve force, closing escape routes. This system did not allow randomness. It allowed control. And control wins wars more consistently than emotion or courage alone. Discipline and training. Shaka's army was not just trained. It was reshaped mentally. Warriors were pushed beyond normal limits. They trained barefoot to increase endurance. They were required to move as a unit, not individuals. Even rest was controlled. The idea was simple. A warrior who cannot break formation cannot be defeated easily. But this level of discipline came at a cost. It created loyalty, but also fear of leadership itself. The psychology of fear. What made Shaka truly dangerous was not just his tactics. It was the psychological impact he created before battles even began. His reputation spread faster than his army. Entire groups would retreat upon hearing his forces were approaching. Not because they had lost yet, but because they believed they already had. Fear became a weapon as powerful as spears. And in many cases, it ended battles before they started. The expansion of power. As Shaka's system became more effective, his influence grew rapidly. Tribes were absorbed. Territories were unified. Resistance became harder to maintain. But this was not simple conquest. It was restructuring of entire societies around military discipline. Villages became supply systems. Communities became support networks. Everything was aligned toward one goal. Strength through unity. The cost of power. But power built through fear always carries consequences. Shaka's leadership style created loyalty, but also tension. Control at this level requires constant pressure. And pressure eventually builds resistance. Even within his own circle. The same intensity that built an empire also created instability inside it. The legacy of Shaka Zulu. Shaka did not just leave behind a kingdom. He left behind a military philosophy that changed history. His strategies influenced warfare far beyond his region. His ideas about discipline, formation, and psychological warfare are still studied today. But his story is not just about victory. It is about transformation. A rejected man who rebuilt himself into a force that reshaped history. Final reflection. So what made Shaka Zulu the most feared leader in African history? It was not just weapons. Not just numbers. Not just land or conquest. It was the combination of vision, discipline, psychological control, and a complete redesign of how war itself functioned. He proved something that history rarely forgets. Fear does not always come from cruelty. Sometimes it comes from order. And when order becomes unstoppable, even the strongest enemies begin to hesitate. And in war, hesitation is already defeat. The world before Shaka's full rise. Before Shaka became a dominant force, Southern Africa was not a unified region. It was a patchwork of clans, shifting alliances, and constant small-scale wars. Power did not belong to one kingdom. It was shared, broken, and unstable. This made survival unpredictable. A tribe could be strong one year and erased the next. In this environment, leadership was not about politics. It was about control and survival. And Shaka understood this better than anyone around him. The transformation of the Zulu identity. Under Shaka, the Zulu were no longer just a tribe. They became a military identity. Every man was expected to serve. Every structure was aligned toward expansion. Even cultural traditions began to shift. Strength became part of identity. Discipline became part of identity. Loyalty to the system became more important than personal freedom. This is where Shaka's leadership becomes controversial in history. Because he did not just lead people. He reshaped how they lived. Military organization like never before. Shaka introduced strict age-based regiments. Young warriors were grouped and trained together. They lived together. They fought together. They advanced together. This removed personal confusion in battle. Instead of scattered fighters, he created unified units that acted as one body. This made his army far more predictable internally and far more dangerous externally. Because coordination is often stronger than individual skill. The end of distance warfare. Before Shaka's reforms, many conflicts involved long-range spear throwing. Battles were often chaotic and less controlled. Shaka changed this completely. He pushed for immediate engagement. Close combat became the norm. This forced enemies into uncomfortable situations. There was no space to think. No space to regroup. Only direct confrontation. And that changed the psychology of warfare in the region. First major expansions. As his system matured, Shaka began expanding outward. Neighboring groups that were once independent now faced a new kind of army. Not just aggressive, but structured. Predictable internally but unpredictable in execution. Many early opponents underestimated this change. They expected traditional tribal conflict. What they faced instead was organized military pressure. And that mistake cost them heavily. How fear spread faster than armies. One of the most powerful tools in Shaka's rise was reputation. News of his tactics spread quickly. Survivors carried stories. Defeated groups warned others. These stories often became exaggerated over time. But the effect was real. Many communities chose to flee rather than fight. This created a psychological advantage. Because Shaka often did not need to fully engage. His name alone influenced movement and decisions. The dark side of unification. As more groups were absorbed or destroyed, displacement became widespread. Entire communities were forced to relocate. This created chain reactions across the region. New conflicts formed not just between armies, but between displaced populations and established settlements. Shaka's rise indirectly reshaped migration patterns across southern Africa. This is why his era is often described as one of both unification and disruption. Both at the same time. Military loyalty and fear balance. Inside his own army, discipline was absolute. Disobedience was not tolerated. But loyalty was also rewarded through status, structure, and belonging. This created a system where warriors felt both pressure and pride. They feared punishment, but they also valued identity within the system. This balance is one of the reasons his army stayed effective for so long. Key principle behind his success. At the core of Shaka's success was a simple but powerful idea. Control reduces chaos. Chaos loses wars. Most armies at the time relied on bravery. Shaka relied on structure. Bravery can break. Structure holds. And that difference decided outcomes before battles even began. The emotional impact on enemies. Opposing warriors often described facing Zulu forces as overwhelming. Not because they were always larger, but because they moved with coordination that felt unnatural compared to typical battlefield chaos. When an enemy sees order while they experience confusion, fear increases naturally. And fear reduces reaction speed. That delay becomes deadly in close combat. The final stage of his rise. As Shaka's power expanded, he reached a point where resistance became increasingly difficult to organize. Smaller groups either joined his system or were pushed out. The region began to shift toward larger consolidated powers. This marked a turning point in southern African history. From fragmented conflict to structured kingdoms. History does not end cleanly. Like many powerful leaders, Shaka's story does not end in simple victory. His system was strong, but also intense. His leadership style created unity, but also internal tension. When control is built at such a high level, it requires constant stability to survive. And history shows that even the strongest systems can change from within. Final build-up for your video ending. When we look back at Shaka Zulu today, the question is not only how he won. It is how he changed the meaning of winning. He proved that warfare is not only about weapons. It is about structure, discipline, and psychology. And once those elements are combined at scale, entire regions can transform. His legacy is not just in battles. It is in the idea that organization can overpower chaos. And that idea did not disappear with him. It influenced generations after him.